The Code of Hammurabi, the law that changed civilization. Before skyscrapers, before constitutions, before modern courtrooms and written contracts, there was a river, the Euphrates, and along its banks, under the burning sun of Mesopotamia, rose one of the most powerful cities the world had ever seen, Babylon. Nearly 4,000 years ago, Babylon was not yet the legendary empire we imagine today. It was one of many city-states competing for land, trade routes, and power. Surrounding it were rival kingdoms, Larsa, Eshnunna, Mari, Assyria. War was common, alliances were temporary, trust was fragile. In this unstable world, a young ruler came to power. His name was Hammurabi. When he became king around 1792 BCE, Babylon was not the strongest city in Mesopotamia. It was vulnerable, surrounded by stronger enemies, dependent on trade and agriculture. But Hammurabi was not just a warrior. He was a strategist. For years, he strengthened Babylon quietly. He built alliances, improved irrigation systems, strengthened city walls, organized the army. Then, one by one, he defeated his rivals. Through war and diplomacy, Hammurabi united much of Mesopotamia under Babylonian control. For the first time, a vast territory with different cultures, languages, and traditions was under one king. And that created a new problem. How do you rule people who follow different customs? How do you maintain order in cities far from the capital? How do you prevent corruption, revenge killings, and unfair judgments? Hammurabi understood something powerful. An empire cannot survive on fear alone. It must have order. And order requires law. Not temporary decisions, not whispered commands, written law. So Hammurabi ordered the creation of something extraordinary, a complete legal code, carved into stone, permanent, visible, unchangeable. The monument that carried these laws was a massive black diorite stele, over 2 meters tall. At the very top of the stone, a carved image shows Hammurabi standing respectfully before Shamash, the god of justice and the sun. Shamash is seated, handing the king a rod and ring, symbols of authority and law. This image was not decoration, it was a message. The laws were not simply the king's ideas, they were divinely approved. Below that image were thousands of lines of cuneiform writing. This was the Code of Hammurabi. It contained 282 laws, but this was more than a list of punishments. It was a vision of society. The code began with a long introduction. Hammurabi declared that the gods had chosen him to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil, so that the strong should not harm the weak. This was revolutionary language. For the first time, a king publicly claimed that his role was to protect the vulnerable. The laws themselves were detailed and practical. If a merchant loaned grain, the amount and interest were specified. If a farmer neglected irrigation canals and caused flooding, he had to compensate his neighbors. If a surgeon performed an operation and the patient died, the consequences were severe. Responsibility was central. Builders were accountable for their structures. Doctors were accountable for their patients. Farmers were accountable for their fields. Justice in Hammurabi's Babylon was structured. One of the most famous principles from the code is often summarized as an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This concept, known as lex talionis, meant that punishment should match the crime. If a man destroyed another man's eye, his own eye could be destroyed. To modern ears, this sounds brutal, and it was. But in the ancient world, it also limited revenge. Before written law, retaliation could escalate endlessly. One injury could lead to family feuds lasting generations. By defining equal punishment, the code placed limits on vengeance. However, Babylonian society was not equal. There were clear social classes: Awilu, upper-class free men; Mushkenu, commoners; Wardum, slaves. Punishments differed depending on status. If a noble harmed another noble, the penalty might involve physical retaliation. If he harmed a slave, he might pay a fine instead. Justice was structured, but not equal. Still, compared to pure chaos, it was progress. The code also addressed family life. Marriage contracts were legally recognized. Dowries were protected. If a husband falsely accused his wife, she could defend herself in court. If a woman was abandoned without cause, she had rights to property. These protections show that Babylonian law was complex and organized. The stone stele was placed in a public location. Even though most citizens could not read, the monument symbolized transparency. It sent a powerful message: the law is fixed, the law is visible, the law is not secret. Centuries later, Babylon fell. Empires rose and collapsed. The stele itself was taken as war loot of the Elamites and transported far from Babylon. For thousands of years it lay buried, until 1901. French archaeologists excavating in Susa in modern-day Iran uncovered the black stone. When scholars translated the cuneiform text, they realized they were reading one of the oldest complete legal systems in history. Today, the stele stands in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Visitors from around the world stand before it, staring at the carved symbols. Those wedge-shaped marks are not just ancient writing, they are the foundation of legal civilization. The idea that laws should be written, the idea that rulers are accountable to justice, the idea that rights and responsibilities must be defined. These concepts echo through time. Later Assyrian and Hittite laws show influence. Even ancient Hebrew law contains parallels in structure. Modern legal systems, though far more complex and humane, still follow the same principle. Justice must be recorded. Without written law, power becomes arbitrary. Without written law, fairness depends on memory and emotion. But with written law, societies can grow beyond small tribes. They can build cities, empires, nations. The Code of Hammurabi was not perfect. It was harsh. It reflected inequality. It enforced severe punishments. But it was organized, systematic, public, and that changed history. Because civilization is not defined only by architecture or military strength. It is defined by how it governs, how it protects, how it punishes, and how it defines right and wrong. Nearly 4,000 years later, in modern courtrooms across the world, judges still rely on written codes, constitutions, statutes, legal precedents, all descendants of that ancient decision in Babylon: to carve justice into stone, to make it permanent, to make it visible, to make it law. And in doing so, Hammurabi ensured that his name would never disappear into the sands of Mesopotamia. Because armies fade, walls crumble, but words carved in stone can last forever.